All right, everyone, welcome to another episode of Not Your Father's Movies. I'm Vito.
I'm Mike.
And I'm Jesse. And we have Dad Fathers coming at you with some big dad energy. And today we have a special guest. It's my wife,
Liz.
Hey, Liz.
Yay! We're so happy to have you.
What's up, Liz?
Really excited to be here.
So this is like a first time, long time situation.
Yeah, because you named the podcast, so it was about time that you came on.
Oh, I see.
How does it feel to be a dad finally?
You know, I've been hoping for this my entire life, so it feels amazing.
I understand. Dads are pretty great.
Yeah, it's really nice to just sort of we contribute what we do, and then afterwards we're just like, oh, my wife is just so strong. She's so incredible. She just really nurtures the crap out of those kids. I'm here just supporting from a distance. It's nice to be on the other side of the fence, isn't it, Liz?
So much easier over here.
The air is light. It's breezy. It's pretty wonderful. But anyway, so thank you. So Liz actually did give this podcast its name very early on in the stages. And so for that, she will always have the title, The Namer of Names.
She's almost like the dad of this dad podcast in a way.
She is.
Because she like made the name and then kind of walked away.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You give the title of Honorary Dad Father?
Honorary Dad
Honorary
Father.
Dad
Of
Father.
course,
There we go.
Of course.
There we go.
The first.
You get to drink whiskey with us.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So trophies are in the budget. There we go. There's
There
a
we
clink.
go.
The trophies are in the budget next year. So look out for yours in the mail. Don't remind us, though.
Am I going to get a trophy, Vito?
No, you're not.
Oh.
You're going to help pay for the trophy.
Oh, shit.
But anyway, we are joined by our very special guest, Liz, because we are talking about 1962's To Kill a Mockingbird. This is a part of our Not Your Grandfather's Courtroom dramas that we've been doing. Other episodes that we have done in this is 12 Angry Men and also A Man for All Seasons. So this is coming from 1962. It was directed by Robert Mulligan, who has kind of a quieter career. He's not a very talked about director, I feel. He's mostly known for his association with his producer, Alan J. Pakula, who's a much, much more well-known director. So Robert Mulligan, though, does have some standouts that I've seen in research, some like Summer of 42 and the others are mentioned quite a bit. I haven't seen anything else this man has done, and neither have I heard anyone ever talk about anything else he's done.
I've never heard of either of these.
Yeah, exactly. I was just looking through these and I was like, I don't know about this guy. But Alan J. Pakula is actually a much more well-known guy. He directed Clute, The Parallax View, All the President's Men, Sophie's Choice, Presumed Innocent, and The Pelican Brief. At least 3 of those movies are movies that I regularly return to and very much enjoy. Uncredited producers on this are Harper Lee, the author, Robert Mulligan, the director, and then Gregory Peck, its primary star. This was, I do want to point this out, though, this was adapted for the screen by Horton Foote, who won the Pulitzer Prize for his own play, The Young Man from Atlanta. And he is the receiver of 2 Academy Awards, one for adapted screenplay, this movie, and the other for his original screenplay of Tender Mercies, also starring Robert Duvall. Tender Mercies is just for any listener out there, it's a heartbreaker movie. It'll crush you. Maybe a future episode, maybe.
Yeah, okay. I've never seen it either, so...
Yeah.
I mean, it depends on how much we want to be like heartbroken, I think.
Yeah, imagine your heart is like an egg, and then Tender Mercies is your heart being cracked into a bowl and then scrambled vigorously.
Ooh, I love it. I'm excited. I'm interested. Like getting scrambled.
I don't want that for myself, but I guess we could do that if we really want.
Well, we'll see. This might be in like year 3, Vito's choosing things, and everyone's sad.
By the time we get to year 3, it's just going to be all Vito being like, "Oh, these are all my favorite movies."
Stay tuned, everyone. Year 3, it's coming.
It's coming.
Spider-Man 3 again.
Don't tempt me. So we do have music, though, by Elmer Bernstein, the incredible Elmer Bernstein, with 256 credits on IMDb, including The 10 Commandments, Magnificent Seven, The Great Escape, Meatballs, Airplane, Stripes, Ghostbusters, My Left Foot, Age of Innocence, and The Rainmaker. This is quite a track record for this man.
Wow.
Maybe the most storied of all the careers in this movie.
Yeah.
That's crazy. That's a lot of different kinds of movies, too.
Yeah, and I was actually kind of thinking about that watching this movie. Is there's a few moments where there are some musical cues where I go, yeah, it makes sense. This guy would later go on to do, Meatballs. Like, this is kids goofing off in the summer. I can hear it.
Yeah.
But it's starring, of course, Gregory Peck, who is just a legendary actor. I have things up for him that he's been in, but I don't know if we need to really remind people of why Gregory Peck is famous.
He's everything.
Yeah. And he had one of the best sort of leading man roles from 1940 to maybe 1960 that could ever be remembered. But Mary Badham, who plays Scout in this movie, was Oscar nominated for this movie, her very first credited role for supporting female actress.
For this movie?
This movie.
Yeah. How old was she? Do you know? I mean, she couldn't have been more than 12.
I don't think she was more than 12.
Yeah.
I wish I had her age. I wish I'd done that research, but she's tiny.
I mean, it's kind of awesome. How often do kids get nominated for an Oscar?
She had the record for youngest nominated actress until the actress that was in Paper Moon, Peter Bogdanovich's film, came out a few years later, and that actress still holds the record.
Gotcha.
But she has not been very active since this movie. She has done some TV shows. She did Twilight Zone, a couple movies, semi-retired in 2005, and is married a school teacher and raised kids. Her brother in the movie, too, Philip Alford, went on to be a very successful businessman. John Mengna did have a few roles in some things, specifically in Star Trek, that are pretty well known, but he unfortunately died of AIDS in his 40s.
And that's still, right?
That's still. Yeah. And everyone else that populates this movie is just a working character actor. This is just a very workman kind of cast. Everyone is known for stuff, maybe not at that time, but later on. Yeah, it's a deep cast. It's a good crew. It is a movie that probably shouldn't have worked because there's none of your typical Hollywood hooks, right? There's no love interest. There's no personal drama. It's really about the story all the way through.
What do you mean by personal drama?
I mean that where there is drama and politics in the family, that's because that's the story. Like there's no additional fat to this movie. It's very lean. It's very clear.
Gotcha. Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, pretty straightforward all the way through.
So anyway, that's sort of all the information I have, and I sort of wanted to hand over all the hosting from here on to Jesse, because that's I think everything that we need to know about the movie. Does anyone have anything to add?
I don't think so. I don't have anything to add. I was looking at the other Oscar nominees. So this was nominated for Best Picture Oscar, but this was a huge year for movies. I just maybe that's the only thing I'd add. We had Lawrence of Arabia, which won Best Picture.
Mm-hmm.
Miracle Worker. Is this another one of Mike's lists from the 1960s?
I've got a few. I also have Mike's history as well. It's not as long, but there's just as many birthdays.
So we're doing real quick. We're doing
we're doing the Mike's 1960s segment.
There it is.
No, this is just, I just wanted to list off the Oscar winners because a lot of these movies are near and dear to my heart, and especially The Longest Day.
Oh yeah.
Which was just a fabulous, fun movie. Music Man.
I don't know about fun. If we can talk about The Longest Day.
Okay, I saw it as an 8-year-old. I was like, this is awesome. John Wayne and everybody else is in this movie.
True. And doesn't everyone die?
I mean, it's sort of half of the people die. I mean, it's about
one
D-Day.
person doesn't. One person doesn't. I can't remember.
Does John Wayne die? I think, is that one of the movies John Wayne dies in?
I don't think he dies. No.
Jesse's very certain about
it.
He
does? He does, yeah.
I think actually most people live. Henry Fonda's in it. He lives.
Liz is
What?
The industrious sounds that you hear is Liz Googling to make sure that we know what we're talking about because we are not prepared.
Well, okay, but just really quick. The Manchurian Candidate, Mutiny on the Bounty, and The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance.
Classic.
It's just these are all in different buckets in my mind, and it's crazy that they all came out in the same year.
I would say that individually and collectively, those movies slap.
Yeah,
is what I would say.
They do slap.
Liz, in your research corner, do you have anything for us?
Wikipedia is not telling me anything.
I'm going to go ahead and say I'm right, and we'll move along from this segment.
That sounds par for the course.
Before we do our next episode, I'm going to look it up, and we get bragging rights. We get dad rights. How about dad rights? We get dad rights for
dad rights. I'm putting my dad rights on the line.
We're going to announce dad rights. Jesse's right, and I'm going to pass the baton to Jesse. Jesse, do you see us in the virtual video chat passing you the baton? Here it comes.
Virtually. and I have it in my hand. And hey, guys, so I'm just going to give a brief plot summary of this movie before we go on to nostalgia. So this movie it's about the 6-year-old Scout. She lives in a small town in the South with her brother Jim and her father Atticus. And basically everything is fine and happy, and her and her brother wander around doing little kid things until one day a judge comes up to her lawyer father Atticus and says, "Hey, I need you to defend this guy, Tom Robinson." And it turns out to be a big deal because Tom Robinson is black, and he is accused of rape against a white man's daughter. And of course, the white men in the town say, "Well, he's a black guy, so don't believe him. We're white." And it becomes a huge deal because the guy, what's the guy's name? The father?
Mr. Hewell.
Mr.
Robert E.
Hewell.
Lee Hewell.
Yeah.
Robert E. Lee Hewell.
Yeah, how could you forget that name?
The most southern of all southern names. So Robert E. Lee Hewell kind of riles everybody up against Tom Robinson and leads a mob against them. Atticus stands up and then also literally stands up in court and defends Tom Robinson, but unsuccessfully, even though logically speaking, it seems like a pretty successful defense. He proves that Tom Robinson couldn't have did it because he would have had to use his left arm, but Tom Robinson's left arm is useless because it was caught in a cotton gin years ago. So after the jury convicts Tom Robinson, he gets shot by a sheriff when he's being transported to the prison. And then shortly after that, basically, Robert E. Lee Hewell attacks Atticus's kids, Jem and Scout. And then out of nowhere, kind of like the town crazy person who's been locked away for years called Boo, he comes out and saves everybody. And then at the end, the sheriff says, well, let's not charge him with murder because let's just say Robert E. Lee Hewell killed himself. And they leave it at that. That briefly summarizes the plot. There's a lot more in there about sort of growing up and kids and finding things. Honestly, a lot of the first hour is mainly just like kids being kids and going off and doing crazy adventures that you would never do in the 2010s or 2020s. Yeah. Like I was watching this movie and being like, wow, I don't think I'd ever let my kids just wander around the streets like that.
And also,
a very small town.
A very small town, you're right. But also, I love that you could let your kids go out and play. And then when it was time for bed, you would simply walk out to your front porch and just yell your kids' names. And then they would come back home.
Because how far could they really be?
Oh, geez.
Right.
And because you trusted all your neighbors, right? Even if you didn't like your neighbors necessarily, like there was, the scary old woman who would like yell at Scout and Jem as they're walking by.
Mrs. Dubose.
She's got a Confederate pistol in her
lap.
robes.
Yeah. She'll shoot you. You come back here, Jean Louise Finch.
You don't hey me, Jean Louise Finch.
I love the first hour. Well, actually, I can't really say I love the first hour. So maybe I'll start out with nostalgia then, because I don't really have much. Like, I think this is one of the movies that it was on sometimes. Like some of the scenes I remember. None of it really stuck with me. Maybe some courtroom scenes. And then later watching it as an adult, like we watched it because Liz was teaching it at the time and we wanted to compare like the book and the movie and stuff. And so I watched it again as an adult. It was all right. Even watching it now, I really, really like the second half. And then the first half kind of bores me a little bit.
In fact, we had to watch it over 2 nights because the first night Jesse was so bored. He was like, "Can we finish this tomorrow?"
Classic Jesse.
Yeah. So I think we know where I'm going to head with this movie. I still really like the movie. I think it has a lot to say. But overall, I like just watching it again. It's just, especially coming, because we just did like 12 Angry Men and A Man for All Seasons, and those were so tight all the way through. The dialogue was so amazing. And then here, it's not quite that. It's more about like reminiscing, I think, about a childhood, which I've never had before. So I didn't quite get it as much. What do you think, Vito?
Just for everyone to know, Jesse was born an adult.
Yeah.
and bypassed all of those early stages.
Came out fully bearded.
It was very disturbing for his mother The beard really threw her off, I think.
He's actually kind of like Benjamin Button. He's going backwards, so he hasn't had his childhood yet.
Well, and also it's really sad for him because he was born at age 40. Like, he has a very short life. We should not be laughing. This is very sad.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's serious.
Yeah,
Thank you, Mike.
we should all laugh for the childhood I never had.
It's coming.
It's coming.
Don't worry.
Pretty soon, I'll be roaming through the streets, like greeting all the grumpy neighbors. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't wait to hold baby Jesse.
That's a really weird idea.
That's creepy.
Does the beard fall
that gives
out?
This whole idea of a dad podcast.
I think the beard gets bigger. Does the beard get bigger,
Legend
Liz?
holds it does.
Liz, does the beard get bigger?
Of course.
Mm-hmm.
Good.
There we
Good.
go. Awesome.
Yeah, it gets the biggest that I am in real life when I am the oldest,
Santa Claus,
which
Jesse.
is my youngest.
Dude, this is like tripping me out, man.
I don't know
All
what
right.
we're talking about anymore.
All right, Vito, when did you first come into contact with this movie? You said this weekend?
Yeah, I am
Crazy,
very
man.
much a To Kill a Mockingbird newbie. I missed this in high school, which I guess is when most people would approach something like this. I feel like if you would ask the common person on the street, if this was like all the late night talk shows when they go out and they just ask people about random subjects, everyone would be able to remember when they were 14 or 15 reading this for the first time. I just never had that kind of experience with it. I always knew that it was a classic. I always knew what it was about and that it was important. But like a lot of movies in this ilk, I will not name them here because I don't want you to think that I'm stupid. But there are a lot of movies that I'm missing that are classics. I'm so happy to have been able to say that I have seen this. And I've seen it twice, actually. I watched it twice this weekend, and I could not disagree with you more about the way that this movie flows from first act to second act, from first hour to second hour. This movie, I kind of thought I had two preconceptions. One, that it was primarily a courtroom film, and two, that it ends with Gregory Peck's sort of rousing final closing argument in the trial of Tom Robinson. Neither of these are true.
Not at all.
In fact, there's another 20 minutes after this like big climax where he delivers this incredible 6.5 minute speech that's almost entirely a one take. And they said that was the first take. They did it.
Oh, wow.
They did it the first time, and Peck nailed it.
Wow.
Peck had it. And if you watch it, it's surprising how long it goes without cutting.
Yeah.
It just keeps moving. He
It's
keeps
so intense.
Yeah, and he keeps
It just
moving
builds
around
and
the
builds.
frame, and the camera slowly is following him, and his hand gestures are so beautiful. But I loved that first hour of getting to know the kids, really understanding that Atticus is not really the main character. He's the hero, but he's not the main. It's really about the kids watching their father go through something very intense. And what they learned from that, and what they learned about racism, what they learned about excluding different people, what they learned about acceptance of your neighbors. I loved this thing start to finish. This is one of the greatest films I've ever seen. This is very,
Cool.
very special to me. And I'm going to spoil a future section when talking about this nostalgia, is that I can't wait to show this to my kids in the future, because this one is really big. And I could not believe I had slept on it for so long.
Yeah.
I mean, mea culpa. I messed up.
Hey, that's cool. This is like the one and only time that's going to be the case. I feel like I'm saying that every time, like every movie. I'm like, oh man, I should have seen this before. And like, this is a movie that I've seen.
Tell us.
Yeah. So to jump over, I think I don't remember when I first saw this. I think I was way too young to get it. I didn't get what was going on, like what Tom Robinson was accused of. I guess I thought, like, I realized that it was like beating a white woman, and like there were race issues. I didn't know what rape was.
Sure.
And I thought it was just kind of like violence. So I think it was like pre-puberty.
Wow.
When I first saw it, and then we didn't watch it for a long time.
So your parents really pulled a veto, and they just showed this to you, just like,
Yeah.
like, here, watch it.
Well, so I had heard for a long time, one of our close family friends is a lawyer. And as all of our listeners know now, there's a lot of lawyers that have kind of been around in my life. And so they always said like, oh, this guy is Atticus Finch. And so I think I pushed for it. I was like, oh, I want to see this movie, this movie that you've all talked about that Pat's like. And they said, oh yeah, sure. And it was just kind of a case of like, they probably hadn't seen it for 30 years. And then they realized like, oh, this is all about rape. And so we didn't watch it again after then until I was in high school, and was able to get it and understand what was going on. But so much of this movie is impactful, and Atticus Finch, I mean, I know for me, it was like, wow, this is what a man looks like. This is what it means to be a man sort of operating in the world today. Yes. I mean, it's a movie made in the 60s about the 30s. So it's not really, it's almost 100 years ago, this story.
Yeah.
But the way he takes stuff and what he does in defending Tom Robinson, the way he approaches other people for the most part is pretty great, something to shoot for.
Yeah, I wish I had the self-confidence and that clear understanding of who I was and how I was perceived in the community.
Oh my gosh!
And what my responsibilities were, because he never seems to be out of step with the big picture.
Yeah.
He knows who he is. He knows how he's perceived, and he knows how those two are married together, and how that is himself. To talk about like Thomas More from Man for All Seasons. Is another way, another man. And what I would believe juror number 8 to be also in real life. These are men that know exactly who they are, exactly where they're at, and exactly what they need to do, because that's what just matters. Themselves.
Yeah, what matters to who they are as people.
Yes. So like that one scene I want to draw as an example is when he's walking out, when the kids have snuck in because they want to see where Boo Radley's cell is.
Yeah.
And then he kind of comes out and he sees the kids and he sends them packing. And then Ewell comes out and is like, hey man, like, thank you so much for, I'm sorry to bother you with all this stuff. I mean, I was like, Mr. Finch, he's on our side. We're just wasting time here. And Atticus goes, no, like, I am been duly appointed to be his representative and I will defend him. And he goes, but like, you got kids of your own. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And he just says, good day, because that's exactly what he needs to do.
And Ewell says, what kind of man are you?
Yes. And he doesn't respond because it doesn't matter, because his actions speak for himself.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I think,
Yeah. Drawing the comparison between him and Thomas More it's funny, because when I was watching it, I was like, wow, Atticus in a way is sort of the ideal American dad in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
He's the dad who's just like, he's a man who like every little boy like looks up to and is like, yeah, that's what I want to be. Like, I want to be poor, but well dressed. And I want to be logical, but empathetic. And also I need to know when to just be silent. And like there's that part where Ewell spits at him afterwards. Right. And he just kind of like looms over him just a little bit. And is super intimidating because he's just so big. He's got that sort of like American strength, I guess. There's something about like big American dads that are tall.
It's righteous strength.
And then he just he waits just the perfect amount of time, pulls out the handkerchief and wipes his face off.
And then
just walks around.
Then throws it.
Yeah. Well, while he's walking around, he just,
because he doesn't want to have anything to do. Yeah. It's the best response. I want nothing to do with you. I don't want any of you on my face. But it was funny contrasting that to like Thomas More, because Thomas More is he's not the righteous strength sort of guy. He's more like the witty guy who's way more cunning, which is way more of like a British virtue. I'm not British, but it just seems like it is.
No, it's just different because Gregory Peck as Atticus is not the one on trial.
Yeah.
Thomas's person is on trial in that movie. And his person, while it's being tested, and he must stand up for himself, and he must defend this defendant with his own personal set of ethics and his understanding of the law. He is he's on trial here. He needs to defend himself, and Peck has to defend somebody else.
Yeah.
What did you want to say, Mike?
Well, I'm just I really want to hear about Liz's nostalgia with this.
Of course, yes.
And I want to conclude mine, because I wanted to share that. So for me, there's a lot of stuff here, like seeing this guy, like he's a real sort of paragon of virtue and an example of virtue to me that I really, stuck to as a kid, and saw like, oh, I want to be like that. But it was also interesting because I felt a lot like the kids. My father had passed away when I was young, not as young as they were, but it was kind of a contrast with them because their mother passed away. There's that beautiful scene with Scout and Atticus together.
And then the brother.
Tearjerker, man.
And the brother, too, when she's talking to the brother when she goes
yeah,
to sleep.
And then they go to sleep. And it was kind of cool. It was something that I was like, I connected with immediately on that level, and then from like I want to be this man level as well.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's my nostalgia, I guess.
You said you'd read the book a few times too, right?
I've read it a couple times, and then I read the Ghost at a Watchman recently. But yeah, I read them a lot later. I don't know if I'm really interested in talking about which I think is better. And that's what everyone's going to ask, like, oh, which do you think is better? I think that they're both extremely good on their own.
They're very similar.
Yeah, but it's been a little while since I read it. But Liz, I know that you read the book fairly recently, right?
Well, I didn't read it fairly recently, but I taught it to several classes of 8th graders. So when we were going through the book, I taught each chapter 3 times in a row each day.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, wow.
So at some point I knew the book really well, but it's been about 5 years.
Okay.
8th
graders.
Yeah.
This is a heavy subject for 8th graders.
It is. That same year we also read Lord of the Flies, and we kind of took the 2 books in conjunction, which was really cool. Like Vito, my first experience with this movie was in my adult life, teaching it. So that was terrifying, actually. And so I don't have like the nostalgia aspect, I guess, that, I would have if this was required reading as part of my own school experience. But I had the really unique experience of seeing the story the first time through the eyes of pretty young readers. And kind of helping them understand what was going on and grapple with all the themes of the story, which maybe we'll get into later. And that was a really special experience for me because, obviously I had to learn it and understand it really, really well to be able to teach it, but also to just watch them come to understand what this book and just story was about was really cool. And so I watched the movie for the first time when I was teaching the book. Because, I think we were just like, oh, why not?
Yeah.
Let's just watch the movie because I'm completely immersed in the book right now. And, I really like it. I think Gregory Peck makes Atticus really come to life. I don't know how you get a better Atticus than played by him.
He fought for that role, but also didn't Harper Lee say basically like,
Harper Lee broke down in tears at one point seeing him walk onto set, and she said, you remind me so much of my father. And he was actually able to meet her father, who died during production. They had a bit of a relationship. He based almost everything on that. And so when she saw him at this particular, I don't know, I think it was during her 3 weeks when she was on the set, she said, you look so much like him, even down to your little pot belly.
Oh my gosh.
And he said, Miss Lee, that is just good acting.
The pot belly.
The pot belly, yes.
That's
but actually,
have you ever seen like an interview with him or anything?
I've seen a couple, not necessarily about this movie, but the last thing to sort of conclude that relationship that they had is that she actually gave him her father's watch and chain, and he wore it at the Academy Awards ceremony where he won the award.
Oh,
that's really
the Oscar
cool.
for Best Acting.
Oh, wow.
That's really cool.
That's really special.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I saw an interview by him a while ago, probably talking about To Kill a Mockingbird.
Sure.
And I guess he said, like that's the movie that people will stop him in the street to talk about. And he's passed away at this point. He just like has this quiet dignity to him that's like I'm not sure if this is acting with Atticus Finch. Like I think that this is him. He had a quiet dignity. He had just an extreme thoughtfulness that is pretty rare to see, I think, in an actor giving an interview, which was just, it's something that like really struck me when I saw it.
And I think to add on to that point too, and also to add on to sort of his portrayal of Atticus Finch as being maybe emblematic of his own character, Brock Peters, who plays Tom Robinson in this movie, actually delivered his eulogy at his funeral.
No way.
Yes.
Wow.
That's so cool.
And he kept up with the 2 child stars, specifically Mary Badham, throughout their lives. And Mary Badham talks about the relationship he had with Gregory Peck, and he would always call her Scout, and she would call him Atticus.
Oh man, that's really cool.
Because he knew her from when she was a young child.
Yeah.
I mean, that tells me that this movie had a profound effect on the personal lives of all of the actors involved, which that's really cool.
Yeah, it was very deep. And I think that it's made to garner that response. And I'm so happy that I think that, Liz, maybe you're in the most perfect position for this, because you were able to talk and help kind of form ongoing future opinions of this movie, like future generations that are coming, how they view and react to this piece of art. You were a big part of that. I mean, that's pretty incredible.
Yeah. How did the 8th graders react to it when you guys were going through it?
It was a heavy story, like you guys were saying, to be tackling with kids that age. I think one of the things that they grappled with the most was the courtroom scene and Atticus's argument for why Tom Robinson is innocent. And just going through the details and figuring out, like, oh, there's this mountain of evidence that he's innocent. Mm-hmm. And then the fact that the jury could stare the truth in the face and turn around and say that he's guilty. I mean, I just watched them struggling. Like, how is that possible? How is that humanly possible that people can do that? And for a lot of them, this was the first time they'd really thought about that, about a total lack of integrity and a total just injustice happening in the one place where justice should be upheld the most. And I mean, they were just floored by this book and just, the story.
I think if there had been like a camera on me, you would have probably seen similar facial expressions, because again, like I said, I just knew that there was this trial, and I just sort of assumed that justice wins out. I mean, Gregory Peck wears a white suit. Yeah. Like, he's the good guy. And the argument that he makes is so persuasive. It's something I've seen in so many clips of the greatest monologues ever given on film. And I just thought, like, the sheer power of this performance, of these words, should convince anyone listening. And then the whole trial building up to that too, when like his arm, he's like, no, I got it caught in a cotton gin when I was 12 and the muscles tore loose. It don't work.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I really wanted to, like, I was so puzzled by what was happening, and I was angry and frustrated and didn't know what to do with myself. So I feel for those 8th graders. And when it was finally over, I had that same feeling of being betrayed almost. Yeah. Like, I felt betrayed by the movie. I felt betrayed by the American justice system. I felt betrayed by culture. I felt betrayed by my fellow man, which honestly, since we're recording this in 2020 and we've seen what's happened with recent riots, protests, political movements, political ideologies, equal treatment for people, it just, I get it. I'm mad.
Yeah.
But that's exactly what she set out to do, right? As the author of the book. I mean, I think one of the most striking lines and one of the themes of the story is when Atticus tells Scout, like, you can't really understand a man unless you walk around in his shoes for a while. And that's climb into his skin. His skin. And what you're describing is kind of exactly what I think is the whole point of this. You're reeling at the injustice of it because you've seen it from the point of view of Atticus and kind of through Atticus, Tom Robinson. And you can't understand how this could be true, but it is. And there's no better way to get across, I think, what you should be getting from this movie than doing it in that way. So it's kind of cool to hear you talk about it like that.
I have one question for you, and it's directly related to this, Liz. And maybe I'm stepping on something that should happen later, but it ends, right? The trial ends. Tom Robinson is guilty. He comes up behind Tom Robinson and says, look, it was optimistic to think this would go well, okay? But we got him on the appeals. And Tom Robinson just gives him a look, and they leave. And later on, you hear that Tom Robinson has been killed, okay? Now, the moment that the movie ended, I turned to my wife, who is a huge fan of the book, and this is her first time seeing the movie as well. She didn't want to spoil the book for herself, but she loved the movie in the end. But the first thing I said was, yeah, they murdered Tom Robinson. Like they straight up killed that guy. Because how else is this man who cannot use his left arm? He can't even catch a glass with it. He broke free of restraints and ran. Have you ever tried to run with your hands handcuffed or tied in any way? It's really hard. And try and imagine you handcuffed and you can't use one arm. And you overpowered deputies and you got away and you were gunned down.
Yeah.
No, I think that the police straight up killed Tom Robinson. I don't think they wanted to wait around for an appeal. I don't think they wanted to see what would happen with him maybe getting out. I think they ended him.
I think so. I mean, I could.
Sorry, that was loaded and everyone wants to jump at it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll go first, and then you can go. I think it's possible that he tried to break free. I mean, like the look that he gives is like, no, we're not going to appeal this. Like he knows that he's going to die. And so it could have been like a suicidal break free. But I really think, if anything, it was just like, I'm going to give them the opportunity to shoot me before I have to go through the process of being put to death. Because he knew that if he did break, they would shoot to kill, as they did. I mean, I think either way you're right, basically, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I don't think I would go so far as to say that they intentionally shot him. Well, obviously they intentionally shot him and killed him, but I don't think they just cold-bloodedly killed him. He was like running away. I think the running away thing is happening. I think that's all I'm trying to say. And the reason being, like, well, he's having his freedom taken away. And there's still some connotations of slavery here, right? Like, he had his arm, like, mangled in a cotton gin, and he's, like, they describe him walking every day to go work in a field somewhere. But he gets stopped every day by this white woman who's asking him to come inside the fence and do work for her. Yeah. Right. So, like, yeah, slavery is not there, but it still seems like there's that looming aspect of that can still dominate his life again, because it still sort of is, but he still has like some semblance of freedom, which is why he's able to have a trial before he goes off. So I think either one, maybe he just wants to escape and die a free man rather than die a slave, which is what he thinks might happen to him. Or two, he in this movie, there's a mob of people that come and try to kill him.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Or at least brutally meet him up. But I imagine they were thinking of lynching him.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, they're going to lynch him.
Yeah,
for sure.
So, like,
there was a lynch mob.
He's gonna get lynched if he goes to prison. Like he
wasn't gonna go to prison. He was just gonna get lynched, and he knew that.
Yeah. So, like,
what do you think, Liz? Like, is this suicide by cop, or is this intentional murder? What is this?
I mean, I think it was left ambiguous for a reason, but my interpretation was always that he knew what was going to happen to him. He knew that there was no justice to be found in an appeal, and he would rather die by running away with a gunshot than be lynched.
And it was your 8th graders that said that too, right?
Yeah, they're the ones who kind of came to that. I mean, I don't know if you can use 8th grader minds as evidence.
But how did they? We are now. That? Like, what did they?
I think the 8th graders
they were really smart 8th graders.
Yeah.
Oh, they were horrified. They were absolutely devastated, because that's not, like you were saying, Vito, I think that's not the way the whole story is built up. Like, Atticus is an upright, just man. Therefore, he should be able to prove that Tom Robinson is innocent. And what happens instead is justice is not served. And it's so disappointing. And then on top of it, not only is he found to be guilty, but just out of nowhere, he dies. And I think one of the beautiful things about the way this story is told is it's also through the eyes of Scout. And so for that to happen, I think you feel the jolt more, because you're seeing it through she's like, what, 8 or 9 at this point? You're seeing it through a young girl's eyes, and there's no rhyme or reason to it. It just happened. And now she and the rest of Maycomb are left having to make sense of it. And it's a senseless death. And that's what's so awful about it.
Yeah.
Wow.
While you were teaching this, did you ever have to explain racism to your kids?
No.
Maybe an important part of this, Liz, just real quick, is maybe just try and identify sort of what ethnicities the kids were primarily that you were teaching.
Yeah, they were definitely primarily white. But I had several Black students. And the really cool thing about, so we taught this book in a very Socratic method where everybody had a voice in the room, and everything that I did was meant to get all of them talking about it rather than me lecturing. And so I think that everybody kind of was able to put aside those things and just talk about the story as the story itself, which was really cool for me to experience because that's a mature thing that people our age are not able to do in many, many cases.
I still struggle to this day.
Yeah. So like it was Socratic method. So every day you had to like come up with a question or something to like ask them to like spur on a conversation, right? So what were some of the most like engaging conversations that you had? Like what question did you ask to get that started?
Well, I think one of the more obvious ones is talking about that quote from Atticus, who says that it's a sin to kill a mockingbird, which, and obviously, the name of this book and movie is called To Kill a Mockingbird. So one of my favorite questions that I would ask them is, why is it a sin to kill a mockingbird? And then once we hammer that out, who is the mockingbird in this story, or who are the mockingbirds? And I mean, yeah, that's probably my favorite question of the whole thing to talk about. I don't know if you guys want to take a shot at that.
Yeah. Do you guys have a take on that? You have something you like to talk about in regards to that?
I do have one take on it because I was looking up, because after Atticus says the thing where like it's a sin to kill a mockingbird, but he could go out and shoot all the blue jays that he wanted.
Blue jays suck.
It really struck me that Atticus's last name is Finch. There's Atticus, Jim, and Scout Finch, and then there's also Tom Robinson. So I just randomly Googled like mockingbirds and finches, and the first thing that pops up is like Darwin. So Darwin was influenced by mockingbirds and finches, right? Those were the finches. So at first he was studying mockingbirds with the beaks, and then it led to the finches on all the different islands, kind of determined that like, oh, these all came from like one species. So I think
this book is about evolution.
Yeah, it's written against creationism. That's the whole point of it.
That's what we should take away from this.
Yeah. All right.
Well, I think it's pretty obvious that you could maybe take away that maybe like the finches and the mockingbirds are sort of supposed to be the same thing, and I think you can sort of say the same thing about robins, right? If you think about finches, mockingbirds, robins, those are like nice, sweet little birds. And maybe connecting it back to Darwin, they all literally came from the same bird. They come from the same source. They are the same thing. They just evolved to be slightly different looking.
That's interesting.
And then there's the blue jays, which I think it's left to imply, if you're taking the evolutionary standpoint, that like, yeah, these things are essentially the same, but blue jays are notoriously bullies. Yeah, they just like harass all other birds.
They harass birds and people and cats and children. They're awful. I hate them.
Exactly. Everybody hates them. That's why it's okay to kill the blue jays.
Yes, it is.
Go ahead, Vito.
Oh, no, I almost bought a pellet gun because there was this blue jay that would not stop harassing the neighbor's cat that came over to say hi to my daughter. And my daughter's day was so much made by this cat's appearance. And this blue jay made her hide underneath the car. And so my daughter would be trying to interact with this cat.
The cat hid beneath the car, or your daughter hid?
No, the cat.
The cat. Okay.
If my daughter hid underneath the car, that blue jay would be dead.
Yeah.
Straight up.
Yeah.
No, but it would be annoying because I knew when the cat was around because I could hear that damn bird outside.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, that bastard is out there again tormenting that beautiful neighborhood cat that my daughter gained so much joy from.
That's really fun.
Anyway, sorry, Liz, what were you going to say?
Well, it's just interesting because going with like the Blue Jay thing, I'd say the most obvious Blue Jay in the book is Miss Dubose. And it's really, this isn't fully represented in the movie, but in the book, Jem gets so mad at her that he goes and ruins all her flowers with Scout's like twirling baton. And Atticus is so, he holds her in such high regard, Miss Dubose, that Jem's punishment is he has to go over to her house and read to her every day for a month. Oh, wow. And it's like the worst thing in the world. But you end up learning that Miss Dubose is actually addicted to morphine. And,
oh my gosh.
And Jem,
and she's dying.
She's dying. And Jem kind of, through his friendship with her, kind of inspires her to wean herself off of morphine.
Oh my god!
Yeah, that's right. Oh,
she dies in the process.
Oh,
but she dies a free woman. That's like a huge thing. I completely forgot about that.
I know, it's a really striking part of the story. So I just think it's really interesting because I'd say one of the themes of everything is that you have to look past all these things about people, whether that be race or attitude or history or whatever, to the person who's, you know, at the core. So even Jays are precious, I would say, is ultimately what we need to be taking from this.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm trying to remember the full quote. I don't remember it word for word, but he says something, you can never kill a mockingbird because all they do is sing for our joy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it seemed to me, I mean, the most sort of obvious answer to that, at least if you're looking at sort of structure and everything, and the fact that he's doesn't do anything like mean to anybody, is Dill, right? Or not Dill, Boo Radley, Arthur Radley.
Mm-hmm.
Because all he does
they
is
name him as a mockingbird. That quote is in correlation.
Yeah, and the end quote is, you know, is Scout saying, you know, he's it would be like shooting a mockingbird.
It's what the sheriff, right? Because he doesn't want to call him out. He doesn't want to arrest him in any way for probably having killed Yule.
Yeah.
He says he wouldn't want that. That would kill him. To be thrust into the spotlight when he has some sort of debilitating social disorder.
And it's not because like he'd go to trial or anything. It's because all of the nice ladies in town would be bringing him angel food cake every day.
Yeah.
And he'd have to see people.
It would break him.
Yeah.
That's
really cool. It's a really cool scene.
Yeah.
But I think, I mean, like there's a lot more there though, right? Because I mean, the story is really concerned with inequality in general, right? And really, like, people sort of on the fringes of society are like I feel like that's almost like the obvious choice for who the Mockingbirds are. Like the scene where he talks about the Mockingbirds the first time, they've got the Cunningham boy, Will Cunningham.
Yeah.
Which, like, as a kid seeing that's the scene that I remember the most, because I didn't understand like why pouring maple syrup all over your food was bad, because I was like 8 and I thought like, I wish I could pour maple syrup all over everything.
You were Buddy the Elf.
Yeah, pretty much. But now it's like they're having roast for lunch. Like that's the weird thing to me. But but that, I mean, that's when he brings it up, and I think that in a lot of ways, you know, like Will Cunningham at that moment, he's the Mockingbird. It's like, no, don't shoot this guy down. Like what Scout did was talk to the teacher and say basically like he's poor and don't like make him feel that way. The way that Atticus had told her, don't make Mr. Cunningham feel that way.
And actually Calpurnia in that scene is the one that like bangs Scout. Can I see you for a minute?
Yeah.
And then she gets in there and then she just rips into her.
If your guest wants to eat the tablecloth from under the place, you're going to let them. That man is your guest.
Yeah.
But then, I mean, we've got, and then finally, you know, kind of mainly in a lot of ways, the most truly the outcast of society is Tom Robinson, right? He's black. He's outside of that world.
He's black. He's poor. He's disabled.
Yeah.
1,
he's
2,
black.
3.
Yeah.
And it also literally seems like he lives outside of the town. Like they always go out to the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
To go to this house where apparently
the African Americans were fully pushed out of society. They were an entire society to their own. They didn't go to the same churches. I think there's a part in the book where they go to church, right? Which is a really beautiful part.
Yeah.
But then I think it kind of like comes back even to Atticus as being something of a mockingbird, right? Like, isn't that kind of? I mean, I don't know. It's kind of like
that is the point that I did want to make earlier. I'm glad you kept going. But Atticus, I would say, Liz, you tell me if I'm wrong here in my reading of this, but I would say that Atticus is not the hidden mockingbird in this, because I think it's too maybe on the face of it to say that, but he does sing for others. For the pleasure of others. I mean, everyone in the neighborhood has something good to say. Like the neighbor, Miss Mabel, is that her name? When Jem wouldn't come out of the tree, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Scout's like, Miss Mabel, I'm having a terrible time getting Jem out of this tree. And she goes, you kids should be so thankful that man can make a will airtight. And you know that he did something for her that set her up very well. Yeah. And you kind of get that impression for everyone. Even Yule has a very high impression of Atticus. Mm-hmm. Like he looks at him almost as a friend, and he's kind of startled when Atticus kind of comes back at him saying like, no, the relationship that you think is going on here is not in fact going on here. I'm not one of your good old boys. I don't know what you thought. He really does seem to be that well-loved, well-respected. He's done something for everybody. No one has a bad word to say about him. He does seem to fit that mockingbird persona pretty well. What do you think, Liz?
Yeah, I think that's right. And so he's a mockingbird who's hidden in plain sight. And although the book isn't as obviously about him, I think he's a really good example.
I think this title too is also referring to his almost his death, right? Like, it's not the death of his character, and maybe not even the death of his hope, but it's a death of something in him when this does not go. A, Tom Robinson is not acquitted or found innocent, and B, Tom Robinson is killed.
Yeah,
there seems to be something that happens to him. I don't even know what I could say it is, but there's a death of something inside.
I mean, how can there not be?
Yeah,
I think that's I think that's sort of true. Maybe it's like if you kill one mockingbird, then they all die in some way. But also, I think it's a death in Scout and Jem in a way, because this is almost like a coming of age story in a lot of ways, right?
For sure.
Like, this is about like Scout learning about the adult world, not just running around with Jem in their little town doing little kid things, but this time they're actually peering into the adult world and seeing its hideousness and being threatened by it, almost dying, almost getting brutally murdered, walking home from like a Halloween party.
She's okay. I have to say, Jill and I laughed so much because she's in a damn ham costume, and it says ham.
It's just
the whole time.
I would never know what it was if it didn't say ham. So, Paper Mache has come really far since 1962, guys.
So the second watching of it, I was a little bit less like in the moment. Because it's the second time watching it in 2 days. So I know that Jem is currently fighting for his life, and he gets his arm broken.
Yeah.
But I just love the almost Peanuts imagery of a little girl stuck in a ham costume.
Yeah.
It did remind me a whole lot of Charlie Brown. I think there is a comic run where that ends up happening. It's so funny.
Yeah. It's funny.
It's hilarious.
Yeah. It's funny.
That's childhood.
Yes.
Yeah, that's totally it. Yeah. It's childhood. Like, it's these brutal things going on, but like you're kind of stuck in a ham costume. And you can't see them. Maybe I don't know.
Okay, guys, I'm writing a memoir, and it's going to be called "Stuck in a Ham."
I'll read it.
Yeah, I know you would. I know you're going to read.
Oh, just to read "Stuck in a Ham." Stucking in a ham.
Yeah. Stucking in a ham. This is going.
This is great. We're going downhill. But I didn't mean to derail. I'm sorry from the conversation about mockingbirds. But Jesse, did you have an idea about who might have been a mockingbird in this, or who was a finch, or who was a blue jay?
I think at the end of the day, they're all birds, and they're all supposed to respect each other as birds, but the blue jays, for whatever reason, don't. But you sort of hope that they do. That in the end is my conclusion with it, especially with the finches thing and the robin thing. Like, they're all so innocent. They're just innocent birds, and they're all connected through evolution, through one common ancestor. I think that's a symbolic idea with that. Oh, what do you think, Mike?
I never thought about that. Well, I think to to kind of bring it all kind of home, I think that what you're saying and what Liz was saying to begin with was kind of like even Miss DeVos.
Yeah, I think you're right.
She appears to be like a blue jay. She doesn't seem like a nice person. She seems like a really bad person, but then you find out there's this whole story that's underlying her life, and she's also an outcast of society, and kind of every single person is living in this isolated way finally, right? We're all outcasts for some reason, and what you've got to do is to climb into someone else's skin and walk around in their shoes to realize that how isolating the world is. And I wonder if that's kind of the crux of growing up, or like what it means to grow up is to realize like everyone's kind of this way, and what you need to do is to I don't know, maybe that's too big of a statement, but
I guess I don't want to harp too much on the evolution idea, but I guess what Darwin did was he saw the faint similarities between a bunch of different species of birds, right? He saw, and so like we should be doing the same thing, even though people look externally very different. You should be looking into the core and going into their past to find out like where you have some commonality between them.
Yeah. Like
I wonder,
for instance, how we are all able to be friends, even though Jesse is part lizard.
Yeah.
I mean, we've not brought this up on the podcast, but Jesse has a salamander's head.
It's really cool, actually. You can chop it off and it grows back, right?
Yeah, we've done this a couple times.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you should see our kids.
I mean, Liz is a gorgeous human woman, and she was so nice to marry this lizard man.
That's how much this book impacted Liz. She was like, I need to go out to the mocking lizards.
I need to find a mockingbird.
Yeah. And we found a lizard, and Jesse's a beautiful man for it.
Beautiful. With a beard,
thank you. Yeah.
He's growing backwards.
We are going to post some wedding pictures soon. You'll see them on the podcast. Just so everybody can see what exactly my beautiful wife did for me.
I mean, you need to sort of touch up some of those. You were shedding pretty badly. But so Liz, in teaching your 8th graders, was there other not archetypes, but character types that they pointed out or that you pointed out to them that you'd like to share with us?
Well, I think we haven't talked about Mayella yet.
What did your kids find so fascinating about her?
Well, I think at first they thought she was pretty evil, which is understandable because they were just like, this woman is accusing this innocent man of rape. Like, what kind of a woman does that? But then you really look into it and, you realize that, first of all, she was she was completely abused by her father, at least physically. Well, at least.
Yeah.
And she was left alone to take care of, I think it's 7 siblings. They're dirt poor. And she was looking for companionship, and she was looking for somebody to save her from her loneliness, and Tom Robinson. And I mean, he was a married man and she shouldn't have done it, but it's completely understandable why she did. And the fact that her father, beat her up and, completely shamed her for just wanting to seek out human companionship is really, really sad. So on the one hand, it was wrong of her to accuse him of such an awful thing. But on the other hand, she had never been treated well herself. And she was really just dealing out what had been dealt to her for all the years that she'd been alive. So I think in a different way, she's a mockingbird. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yeah, it reminds me of exactly what Atticus says in his big speech, right? She did something that in our society is unspeakable. She kissed a black man. No code mattered to her before she broke it, but it came crashing down on her afterwards. Her, like you're saying, her real sin was number one. I think primarily her real sin, there's this bonds of marriage here, and she holds this position of societal power over him. So she's exploiting that power. But number two, the thing that her sin here, quote unquote, that society is telling her is that it was with a black person. And so in that desperate desire to connect, she has sinned against society in 2 huge ways, which really puts her on the outs and actually does, I think in a lot of ways, engender a lot of sympathy. Like he said, from the other direction, from Tom to Mayella, he had the temerity to feel sorry for a white woman.
Yeah.
Because without these boundaries of race and sociopolitical constructs, they were two people who had genuine human feelings towards one another as to their circumstances in life. And while one should not have acted the way that she did, like you're saying, Liz, it's entirely understandable that happened. And it's even the stuff that he says about his own emotional state towards her, that's entirely understandable too. He talks about her like being in a cage, right?
That was almost like his biggest sin, was feeling sorry for her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And just the fact that it took her a year to save up enough money to send her siblings to go get ice cream.
A slap year.
Yeah. How desperate could she have been to do that? Like, that's really sad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The way that Scout introduces the movie in her retrospective narration to say that, there was no money, but it's okay. There was nothing to buy anyway.
Yeah.
Like this is truly what no money looks like. It takes you a year to save up 7 nickels, 35 cents a full year, so that you can have one afternoon where you can actually try and interact with someone outside of your social strata and feel something.
I mean, she wasn't just, she had him on the property many times before. And with him. But like, that was like, she wanted to have sex with him. Like that's what the purpose of it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think she's looking for that human connection.
Yeah.
She's just looking for something.
Yeah, it's still crazy.
Anything.
Yeah. But it's crazy. Like she spent a year with this solitary focus, putting away cent by cent so that she could have it. It's wild.
And I think that's why I love this story is the race issue is important, but race is put alongside of many other forms of inequality.
Yeah.
And I just love how it gets at that, and it gets at the human condition and human nature, which again is, why we read this along with Lord of the Flies.
Actually, just based on what you're saying, it sounds like literally every inequality you could think of, like women, race. Apparently in the book, it's about drug addicts and how old people are treated too. And also
it's very much about poverty.
Yeah.
And how poor people are, not even poor people, but literally poor farmers who are so poor they can't afford the lawyer fees, so they come and drop off like
food
baskets of goods every now and then, are too embarrassed to say like I did this for you.
This is part of my entailment.
Yeah, because it's just such a debt that he owes. He doesn't even want to acknowledge it.
And it's what they talk about too. Like when Scout asks, like, "Daddy, are we poor?" And he goes, "Yes." And she goes, "Are we as poor as the Cunninghams?" And he goes, "No." Yeah. Like objectively,
they're actually like
not.
the richest people in Maycomb, most likely.
Yeah. Like if you take a look at his clothes as compared to everybody else, he's got a suit in a lot of ways. Like we did the 12 Angry Men, and like when Henry Fonda comes on screen, like he's the everyday man, but he's slightly better. I think I mentioned that in the last.
He's an architect, right? Like he's upper middle class.
Yeah,
right. And Atticus kind of strikes you the same way. Yeah, he's one of us. He's poor, but he's slightly better because he's always walking around really well dressed and just carries himself so well.
Well, he has
he's
servant.
The town lawyer.
He actually has a servant that he pays, and she keeps his house and helps raise his kids and cooks the meals and does the laundry, and they have a very good relationship. But he has enough money that he can sustain someone on payroll.
Yeah,
true.
But then again, that might be why he's poor, because he honestly needs somebody in his house since his wife died. Like, what else would he do?
Yeah. Well, it's everyone's poor. It's the crash, right? Yeah. Everyone's poor in the crash.
It didn't hit us as hard.
Yeah. The reason why it didn't hit them as hard is because the farmers who had hit the hardest are going to him for legal services, and they have to pay him for something.
I mean, what are you going to do? Not have lawyers? Like, nothing you can do here.
Yeah. Nothing you can do here.
Liz, you had also mentioned that your kids were also really drawn to Boo Radley too, right? Which is strange to me. Like, I never read the book. I've only seen the movie, and Boo Radley comes in at the very end.
He's a specter.
In the creepiest way imaginable. He's standing behind the door, and Scout points him out. And apparently they'll think it's normal because Dad walks out of the house.
He's like, "Oh yeah, that's cool to have this white person hanging out."
In my kid's
very like pale person hanging out with my
I'll
kid.
close the door for you guys to be alone.
It did work in the movie,
Different time.
but just if you think about that for any amount of time ever, I would be like, no, get out of my house. I will beat you out. So.
I think it shows how much he trusts Boo, and I think it shows that he was probably a part of whatever legal thing happened with Boo. And he knows Boo's side of the story. He knows Boo very well.
Yeah. I thought, that brings up like a thought that I had, but I think that Jesse, you were in the middle of a thought, or Liz, were you in the middle of the thought? Someone else was in the middle.
I was asking Liz for a thought, but go ahead and give your thought.
Oh, well, okay. This is pretty separate, but I guess we can go here.
Sure. Let's travel.
We're already going there.
We're going here. We're on a magical Michael ride.
That's a good
one. Okay, so Atticus Finch, he's a really interesting guy, obviously, and so. Growing up as a kid, I was like, oh, Atticus Finch is the guy like I want to be. But watching it now, I'm like, Atticus Finch is a man who we're seeing in like the middle of his life. We're seeing him. He's 40 plus, right? So he's lived a long life. Well, not a long life. I mean, 40 isn't old, but he's lived long enough in that town to establish long-term relationships with everybody there.
Yeah.
One of the other scenes that's just like emblazoned in my memory is the scene with the mad dog, when he shoots the mad dog. Yeah. It's great. He's like fumbling with his glasses. And you're like, this is an outtake, right? And then he just throws them away.
Yep.
And he takes the shot.
He nails that dog.
And just blows Jem and Scout's mind. Yeah. Because everybody knows that he is the best shot in Maycomb.
Yeah.
So he's just built up 40 years of his life, this history with people in town to know, where everyone knows that we might not like him all the time because he's really good at everything that he does.
Yeah.
He's the best at anything. And so we don't really want to call him until we need him. Like the judge coming to say, you're the guy.
You to do this case.
You're the guy. I know you've got your own practice. You don't take care of criminal defendants.
Yeah.
You write wills. Like that's your job. But I need you to take care of this defendant because he's proven his mettle, right? That was something I hadn't noticed before or hadn't realized, that like, oh, Atticus is a guy who's sort of, lived this life, which I mean, like that's a key part of the story, I think, with Jem and Scout's growing up. But I guess it just resonated more for me as, a 30-year-old man who has been like, man, why don't people know like that I'm really good at stuff? It's because they haven't seen you do it. Like
it's why whenever friends like talk about how their ACs are messing up, I go like, I'm here, right?
Like,
that's what I do. I could help it. But what do you guys think about that?
Yeah, like I guess it does help to think of that in perspective. I guess this is more of like an old movie thing, right? Sometimes like you're just dropped in the middle of this amazing man who is like, I don't measure up to that like in any way.
Yeah.
I'm so used to it, I don't even know.
I
think you're right. It is an old movie thing. Where they do sort of set you up.
Yeah, but basically that perspective does help me, and it helps to remember that they have like lived a whole life before that time. Because I guess when you see a black and white movie, you just expect that they've already lived for 100 years.
Yeah, for sure.
I also just like it in a movie where there's a relationship between the characters that we don't have to see, but it makes the text feel more lived in and more expressive when that relationship exists and is called back on.
Yeah. Well, it puts you right into Scout and Jem's shoes. You're like, I am Scout and Jem, suddenly realizing that Atticus is more than just like an old man and stuff. And it gets you to it helps you, I think, to go through the process of growing up with them. I mean, like that scene is really pivotal because of that, I think.
Yeah, no, I think you're right.
So sort of the idea of like Atticus almost is like more of a real person to me now than he was when I was 18 or 12 or
for sure. He can seem like an archetype, but here he's a father.
Yeah, he's like a real person. But also I sort of wondered about whether or not he was quite the paragon of virtue that I thought he was to begin with. I'm wondering, I don't necessarily have an opinion, but the thing that really, there were two things that made me kind of think, and I want to know what you guys think about it. But so the first one was when he explains to Jem, I think it's to Jem, why he's going to defend Tom Robinson. And he says something like, there's 1,000 reasons, son, but the main one is that I couldn't hold my head up in town and I couldn't even command you or your sister.
Yeah.
And that's a really interesting line. I think it really connects to both of the other movies that we've done. And I think we should talk about that in general, but I think, maybe this is a way to talk about it. And the other thing is, in his final defense for Tom Robinson, he really treats Mayella and Mr. Huell, Robert E. Lee Huell, with scorn. He's scornful towards their, he says first that he pities their lack of education and their poverty. And then he says, these poor, uneducated, white trash. Yeah. He comes down hard on them. That was I don't know if that's it's what me says, in 2020, seeing that and being like, wow, that's a brutal thing to say.
He says, I have nothing but pity in my heart for the chief witness of the state.
Yeah.
She is the victim of cruel poverty and ignorance, but my pity does not extend so far as to her putting a man's life at stake, which she has done in an effort to get rid of her own guilt.
Yeah, there's more, though. There's more. It is kind of throughout. Even when he gets Mr. Huell to write his name, he says, now, can you write?
Yeah, but he's trying to trick him. And I think that was a mistake on Atticus's part to an extent. But yeah, he's trying to trick him to show that he's left-handed, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, to be honest, Atticus in that courtroom, I don't think he makes the best presentation.
It's way better in the book.
Oh, okay. Maybe this also bothers me in courtroom dramas where this thing happens where they create a separate scenario of what could have happened. I guess that is a valid legal defense or whatever. And I guess he does that right. But in a small town, it does seem like you don't want to do that with the guy who can rile up a whole mob. Just a thought. So it seems like
it does seem unwise.
It doesn't seem like he emphasizes the actual mechanics of how you would do things if you only have one hand to work with.
So personally, I feel like his audience knows that much more than you or I or Mike at this juncture, at this time. I feel like showing a physical inability or a handicap of some kind at that point would have been evidence enough.
Yeah, because all these people are working with their hands.
These are poor people who work with their hands.
And this guy probably works on one of their farms.
Yeah.
He's a sharecropper on one of their farms.
Probably. For sure.
If that.
But clearly he's also known as a guy who you can call in and chop things up for you.
He's known as capable. But also what that should demonstrate as well is that because he's known, everyone knows his left arm does not work.
Mm-hmm.
All he's doing is reminding the audience, again, this is a world that's lived in. This is not a new man. This is not new information necessarily.
Oh, that's true.
That's interesting, yeah.
I think that in his defense, he is simply reminding everyone of what everyone already knows and then saying, this man, Tom Robinson, could not have done this thing. And I think you all know that he could not have done it. Case closed. And now here is my thoughts on the general standing of the fact that this even came to trial.
Yeah, that's true.
You know what? Yeah, I think that's convinced me. That's
maybe it's like Thomas More saying, when he finally gets convicted, when he says, "Here's my thoughts on everything. Now that I'm going to die, I'm going to tell you." Atticus is I've told you everything. You're going to convict him anyway. Now here's my thoughts on the state of the world and the state of these people.
Yeah, but it's because I would not bend to the marriage.
Yeah, but I still feel I don't know, for me at least, that was a revelation and kind of a changing to be oh, well, he's a person, he's casting a case in a certain light, where he's not only trying to prove the innocence of Tom Robinson, but the guilt of Robert E. Lee Huell,
the perjury
of Mayella, and also discredit them through their poverty and lack of education. And then also I'm interested in, I'm interested in hearing you guys' thoughts on that line that he gives to Scout or to Jem about why he's taking the case. Do you guys have thoughts on that at all?
Well, I actually, going back to A Man for All Seasons, right? Well, I personally made the case that Thomas More couldn't have been a good father, couldn't have held up his integrity and signed the pledge. And I think it's the same thing with this guy. He's a lawyer. He's asked to defend a Mockingbird. You have to do it. You can't say that you're a man of integrity and have turned that down.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Especially because he probably knew that he was the only man in town who would give him a fair trial, which is why the judge came to him.
There's literally nobody else. In fact, he's so much the only person that all 12 jurors, think about it. There was no, there was no juror number 8 for their jury. They all just said, "Oh, guilty." They didn't really think about it. Like, he's the only man in town who can possibly do it.
Well, they actually did. They actually did think about it. That's a big line in the movie.
Deliberated for a while.
Yeah, it took them 2 hours, and they were just like
longer than 12 Angry Men.
Yeah,
that was less than 2 hours.
Well, no, 12 Angry Men is like forever, isn't it?
I think it's like an hour and a half. Dude.
No, I'm pretty sure that they were locked in that room like all day.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but sorry, I'm talking runtime.
Oh, okay.
I'm making like a really bad joke. Like, it's not funny because I have to explain it.
You're right. No,
talking runtime.
Yeah. I mean, well, they did say how every day feels like it never ends. So, here you go. Wow. You made a great joke, actually.
Dude,
I just had to point out how.
I'm so deep. I'm the deepest guy now.
Hashtag deep. Liz, what do you think about our discussion? Give us a rundown. How are we doing versus the 8-year-olds?
They were actually 13, but
oh, sorry, 8th graders.
8th graders, 8-year-olds. I don't know.
8-year-olds would be. Whew.
No, yeah, I would not want that.
I don't want to see that.
I'd say
3rd grade. Here's rape.
Are at least at a 10th grade level.
Oh, wow. I feel insulted. No,
I'm just kidding.
I don't.
This has been great because I didn't have to explain the entire plot to you.
Oh, that's good. Although I kind of wish that we had gone back in time and just done that, because I felt like you would have done a lot of work that we wouldn't have had to have done.
Yeah, sounds awesome.
Like, honestly, hearing you say like your 8th graders took them forever for you to go through the trial and all the points that he's making. I guess that is so 8th grade. Like, yeah, you're just going through the plot and all the logical points that they could possibly be doing right now.
Well, some of them got it, but some of them we really needed to go point by point.
It's always the people like me that need to point along.
There are some slow pokes. Yeah, sorry, Jesse.
It's about time to ask, is this a dad movie? So, wait, why don't we start with our distinguished guest?
Our honorary dad.
Liz.
I don't know what your standards are for answering that question.
You got to make it up.
Okay. I'm also not a dad, but I'll do my best.
Do you think I should watch this, and should I show it to Addie and Ben?
Yes, absolutely. I want our children to, well, this is hard because I like the book a lot more than the movie, but I really want our kids to read this book. I think that the beauty of this story is that you are encountering these themes through the eyes of a child. And for that reason, a lot of it is kind of padded in a way that it wouldn't otherwise be when they're first encountering so much of these issues. And that's why I think it's a really brilliant book to be introducing children to. So for that reason, I would argue that, yes, I think that it's a dad movie or a dad book. And I plan on teaching this to our children.
Nice.
That's cool.
That's awesome.
Jesse.
I really like the story. I think the story needs to be said. Like I said, I only halfway enjoyed this movie. I literally only enjoyed half of it.
This is a hard stance to take.
Man.
this is a rough.
But I want my
you.
kids to see the story.
Yeah, just
but honestly,
read the book.
After hearing you talk about it, I really just, it's like I want our kids to read the book and then us all, like, whatever happens though, this story needs to be shown and told, especially in like today's culture, because like
absolutely,
it's really hard to talk about racism, and it's nice to have a story that's made through the eyes of a younger person. I don't think it explains, but just acknowledges that it exists, and then we can all talk about it, and then we can explain why in 2020 we were at home for all the
curfew.
Yeah, that C word. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
It was only for like 2 weeks.
Yeah, we need a good story to talk about racism. This is that story. So yeah, it's a dad movie. I'll give it that. But like, I'll watch it and I won't enjoy it.
I'm so glad that you condescend towards admitting one of the most loved movies of all time as a dad movie. It's very good, especially one that's about dads.
Yeah,
really
only about dads.
I love Atticus. Like, I think Gregory Peck by far is the best part of this movie, and he alone is like worth watching the movie for.
Yeah,
for sure.
I think so.
But yeah, the story is something that we need to share. Anyway, what do you think, Vito?
Yeah, especially. I mean, I hate saying this phrase because this has become very, very pat and very rote for drawing quick and instant attention to something that you find important or impactful, is to say that it seems very of the times. What I mean by that is, when I say this is really of this time, is because this is a timeless sort of story that is told in a very specifically, as we were talking about earlier, American way. I think that this is a classic when it came out, and it's a classic now. It's lost none of its grit, none of its fervor, none of its ability to communicate its message as time has gone on. And even as time has gone on, I think it's only intensified in every way. This, for me, is a classic that I saw too late. And I regret the time that I did not know this story and how it could have informed what I thought of the issues that it brings forward. Yeah, this is for sure for me a dad movie. This is a dad story. This is a story I cannot wait to share with my children. Yeah, that's what I think. What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, I agree. I think both the book and the movie are definitely going to be important in my household. I mean, like you guys said, this is a story that, I mean, just like what we've got here is we've got people from all these places that are classically like places of inequality, people who have been left by the wayside by society, and they're encountering each other and fighting and clashing and trying to put each other down. And I mean, and then we've got Atticus Finch, who he's definitely like a man of privilege, and he does what I think you're supposed to do, which is, try to fight for what's right, to be a man of conscience, to hold yourself to the highest standard, but also hold no one to that high of a standard, and to put yourself into other people's shoes and help them be help them get there. So yeah, it's a dad movie. It's something that I want my kids to see very badly. I think it's absolutely relevant, and I'm really interested to see kind of what happens with this story, with the book and with the movie over the next few years, because I mean, since it was from the day it was written, it has been both lauded and people have tried to burn it. I think people did burn this book from day one. Ironically, because of the fact that it depicted a black man and a white woman kissing, which is just.
I mean, the loving case had not gone forward, as we had talked about.
Yeah, that's right. There's a lot of stuff going on. I guess we're not going to have a Mike's history corner here, but
I mean,
we could, but that'll be another day.
Yeah, maybe we should. So I will say this, is that we will probably do an aftermath episode following this one, sort of recapping and then also sort of picking up the pieces, because what we set out to do, ladies and gentlemen, is do 3 of the most critically acclaimed and beloved films, and they all happen to happen in courtrooms.
Yeah.
And we left a lot of pieces and a lot of topics kind of untouched or only touched upon them tangentially.
Yeah.
I would love to sort of dig in with that. So while this may end our Not Your Grandfather's Courtroom series of films, we will have a wrap-up episode.
Yeah. But before
Jesse.
We end it, though, there's one last thing about Atticus before we get to the topic about like when we want to show this to our kids. With Atticus, I forgot to mention he also like prepares to die for Tom Robinson.
Yeah,
right?
dude.
In front of the prison. So like going back like 15, 20 minutes when he brought up like whether Atticus was like selfless or not when he took up this case. He totally is. Like you can't put your life on the line for somebody and then say that he had like selfish motives going in my opinion.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, like, I feel like that brings up a million questions that I have personally. Like, does anyone ever do anything that isn't out of self-interest almost 100%? It just so happens that your self-interest coincides with the interest of others, but that's like that's a different conversation.
Yeah, that's philosophy corner with Mike.
As Mike says, existential crisis corner.
Yeah. As soon as we finish talking about is this your father's movie or anything, that you can have that corner and we'll just turn off the mics.
Yeah, great, perfect. That's what everyone wants. Yeah, I think that's a great point, Jesse. And I think that scene where he talks to Scout, like, it's very much he's trying to teach her, and he's trying to use this situation to teach like a 7-year-old about something really important to him.
Yeah. So last question about To Kill a Mockingbird then is, what age do you want to show this to your children? Vito.
My wife, like I mentioned, loved this book, and she read it a lot. I think that she encountered it at some point in middle school. And while I think the film itself is very accessible, the concepts it deals with, sexual violence, racial discrimination, classism, and just poverty in general, and the way that different people live their lives, I think make this an older watch. And that might be the first time I've really said that, but this is one of the first movies that we've done for this show that I did not watch with my daughter, even though it was black and white and age appropriate for anyone to really just, the images on display are okay to see for most people. But no, I didn't really want to introduce these concepts at too early of an age. I'm going to wait on this one. I'm going to wait until we have numerous discussions about race and also about her place in a society that, as we have seen, especially recently with things like Harvey Weinstein, or even just if you look at the American criminal justice system in general for forever, you will see that there's just a pattern of violence towards women. And I would like to talk with her about that more before I introduce a movie such as this. So I'm going to say between 10 and 14.
Right there with you, man. I'm this is stuff that we've got to, we're going to have to bring up with our daughters, right?
Yeah.
But that's not something I'm especially looking forward to.
Yeah, it's a heavy duty, but I mean, hey, it's we signed up for it.
Yeah, that's what we're here for.
Yeah.
It's going to come
Jesse?
up at some point.
Yeah,
that's right, and it must come up for their good, for their survival, for their prosperity. The earliest and the earlier the better to get these concepts in, to understand the world as it is and what your place could be in it.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but like it almost seems like you need to have these conversations with kids earlier and earlier. Like, the kids in this movie are just running around town. Like, just the thought of that, it's like I'm not even sure how many of my neighbors I would trust enough to let my daughters do that around here.
There are some neighborhood kids that have come by a couple times that have wanted to hang out with my daughter, and I see them. They're riding scooters around. They're very young. They're between 4 and 8. I think probably 8 is maybe even too old. They're very small, and they are sort of treating this as 1950s Americana. And they come to the door frequently asking if my daughter wants to go out with them. And I go, like, I see you on your scooters in the streets. Absolutely not. Like, where are your parents? Who are you?
Who are you?
Like, I don't know you. How do you know my daughter?
Yeah. It's sad that it's like that. Like, if some kids came by that, I would say the same thing. Who are you? Where did you come from? And where are your parents? Please tell me they're like 100 feet behind you at least.
I'm going to put you on a leash, and then I'm going to call everyone on the block, and they can come pick you up.
Yeah, it's sad, but like back then, you didn't have to talk about being kidnapped, I guess, or being raped, which now is like a conversation you need to have with daughters.
Yep.
And sons. I mean, sex trafficking is a terrifying and real thing.
Yeah, but saying all that, I still think middle school is probably the most age appropriate. Like so the night we were watching this, Addie couldn't fall asleep, so she actually came out and started watching some of it with us. And I was just like, oh yeah, sure. Like, not much happens in this. Like, at least in the beginning, I remember it's just kids playing or whatever. And then the N-word came up a few times.
Yeah, as it does.
And then the N-word was said by Scout, who is supposed to be 6, 7 years old, something like that. And that was who my daughter was identifying with.
Yeah.
I was like,
and Atticus just shuts that down right away. He says, "We do not call."
Well, he's very smart about it. He doesn't treat the word as a boogeyman.
Yeah,
he says the word, and he says that is not something that we say.
Yeah, in terms of any vile word that your kids can say, like it's that is the best way to handle it. But it's also not something I want my kids to be hearing because, if our kids shout it in the backyard randomly, because they shout random words I've never heard them hear before in the backyard, and if our neighbors hear that and come over to us saying, like, "Do you know what your daughter said?" Like,
kids have no filter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're just like, "Oh, Dad seemed like really concerned that I heard this word. I'm going to say it all the time now."
Oh yeah,
it's great.
I had when those words came up and she was there, I just had no reaction. She
didn't notice.
Like I hope it flew right over her head,
she didn't notice.
And that it just went in one ear, out the other. She's like, "Oh, that's a word I don't know and I don't care about."
There's one time where we were watching a TV show and my daughter came in and I muted it and my wife came in and said, "Oh, hey, why'd you mute it?" And I said, "Oh, it's because someone said ASS." And my daughter says, ASS, ASS.
Backfire. Kids are the best.
What do you think, Liz? When are we going to show this to our kids?
Middle school seems appropriate. I mean, I understand wanting to talk to them about these themes before you see this movie, but I also think this movie could be a tool or a primer for talking about these things.
Sure.
So, I think you talk about some of them before, like race and compassion and that sort of thing are all sort of like, I guess, primarily compassion, everything through the filter of compassion, right?
Exactly.
Don't judge a book by its cover.
Exactly.
Don't judge a movie by its first half, Jesse.
Well, I didn't. That's why I dubbed it a dad movie.
Oh, yeah, begrudgingly.
Yeah,
we were all here for that, Jesse. Well, I think that about does it. Like I said, we are going to get to an aftermath episode where we're all going to be able to air whatever it is that we have that are dangling threads. But I'm happy with this conversation. How do you guys feel?
Feel pretty good.
Yeah, this has been some great dad energy that we've all had.
That's right.
Thank you, Liz, for bringing the big dad energy tonight.
That's right.
You're welcome. I've been practicing.
We can tell.
Yeah, it came through on the audio.
Yeah.
No, you've been a wonderful guest. Thank you so much for coming on and shouldering so many responsibilities and really helping us with this conversation. You've been invaluable.
You're so welcome. It was great to talk about it again. It had been years.
We'll have you on more often, though, so that way you can
channel more big dad energy.
Said so just like, you want me to say this, don't you? You want me to say this, don't you? Fine, I'll say it.
You're gonna say it.
Well, from all of us at Not Your Father's Movies and our spouses and our families, thank you so much for listening.
Have a great night. Hey everyone, this is Mike from Not Your Father's Movies. Thank you so much for listening. If you've got any questions on tonight's episode, thoughts on movies that should or should not be in the dad canon, and most importantly, things Vito got wrong, we'd literally love to hear from you. Shoot us an email with anything you got at notyourfathersmovies@gmail.com. That's notyourfathersmovies@gmail.com. And if that's not enough for you and you want more ways to listen to us, reach us, share us, and support us, check out our website at nyfm.podbean.com. That's nyfm.podbean.com. Shout out to Max Agros for our sick theme music. Thank you, Max, and thank you all again for listening to us. Have a great night.